President Trump has now been in office for 629 days, but who's counting? The Record newspaper of New Jersey has been visiting some areas that Trump won to check in on voters who supported him and those who didn't. And it started in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Here's a sample.
It's not that we have to agree. It's not that we have to believe the same things, but we have to be in a relationship that allows the society to function.
There was an African proverb. He said it was, and it went like this. He said, when two elephants fight, the grass suffers. And you know, it was very short and to the point. So I adapted that to say, when the elephant and the donkey fight, the grass suffers. But when you reduce things to short sound bites, there's no wonder that everything turns into the polarization.
But each side has something valid to say, and we do need to listen to each other.
I'm against that.
Listening to each other?
If it's Dominic, I'm not so sure.
We just spent 41 seconds listening to them. Earlier today, Rich spoke with columnist Mike Kelly from The Record.
Mike, first of all, amazing piece, and what I want to do is start with the first piece, which takes place in Gettysburg, which isn't coincidental to this conversation, obviously.
No,
as people know, that, you know, in many places, symbolic of this country that was riven during the Civil War with two sides. And now, I can't remember a time, at least certainly in the last 40 years, where we seemingly are more polarized, more tribalized. There's issues of color, there's issues of class, there's issue of geography of coastal and middle America. And what you did find when you went there was people that were at least willing to try to talk to each other. I think all of us in our personal lives, you'll almost set ground rules where we're not going to talk about this time because we're going to try and enjoy dinner.
No Trump tonight.
Yeah, exactly. And these people, bless them, said, no, we're not going to ignore the elephant in the room here. We're going to talk about this, but we're not going to roll our eyes. We're not going to yell at each other.
Yeah, this was new. I had gone to Gettysburg in 2017 and just to profile the town because that's where Trump delivered his speech. This is what I'm going to do in the first 100 days in office. So I went back this year and I found something new. I discovered that there's a group that meets on a fairly regular basis at a church. It's Trump supporters and Trump critics, and their purpose is to come together and find ways to talk civilly to each other about Donald Trump and the issues of the day. And what struck me as interesting, they have rules for the road. You can't roll your eyes, you can't interrupt, you can't make, I love this term, inappropriate noises. You know. And they follow the rules and they actually get along. And I think it's a sort of template for the rest of the country. You know, can we discuss as Americans our differences? Well, we can.
And I know it's anecdotal because it's a group, it's not emblematic of the whole country, but it did seem that they all agreed that the most polarized and the loudest voices have been getting the most oxygen to the detriment of this debate or this conversation in this country. And I took it that even some of the Trump supporters acknowledged that some of his rhetoric, the inflammatory stuff, isn't good for anybody. Did you get that more than a year or so into his administration, that even they agreed, even if they liked how he's doing, they don't like how he's doing it?
Right. Trump's style is, people are starting to see that there's a problem there. Here's the difference. On the East Coast here in New York, we focus on Trump's style all the time. We're constantly talking about what his style of governing the country is doing to the country at large, okay? Out in the heartland, I'm finding, you'll see this in the upcoming pieces, people are much more forgiving. They have a very different attitude about Trump. One person said to me, we don't talk about Stormy Daniels, the porn star that Trump now admits that he actually paid off to shut up.
Mike, can I ask you about that? Because there was a woman in your piece who was a fervent Trump supporter. But without knowing it, I would bet you that when the Lewinsky affair became public, she, like most Americans, was taken aback by the moral failings that went on with the president at the time there and the tawdriness of the whole story. Why, for so many people, was that so unacceptable? And the idea of a president with a 4-month-old baby paying off a porn star and a Playboy model and saying the things he did on Access Hollywood, it happens.
A couple thoughts on that. First of all, it's the economy. People have traded off that moral outrage for a desire to improve their lives. I don't think we realize here in New York and New Jersey how difficult it's been for middle-class people in Ohio. You know, when you live in a town that whose industry is a steel mill, for example, and that steel mill closes, and then the town, it was like someone opened up a trap door under the town and everything fell out. We don't see those kinds of effects here on the East Coast as much as you see it in those small towns in the heartland. So that's one thing. The second thing is, I think people have made Trump supporters have made a kind of deal with the devil, so to speak. They want change so badly in the Supreme Court, in deregulation and those sorts of things. They want change so badly that they're willing to put up with Trump's foibles, so to speak.
One issue that obviously was central to the Trump campaign was the subject of immigration, and you got into that on a human level in the second part of your series, where you went to Hazleton, also in Pennsylvania. It's a town that's essentially a microcosm of the debate in immigration that's playing out across the country. Nearly 60% of the town now Hispanic, and that is a major change from the town's population not that many years earlier. And along with that, has brought strife from longtime residents who are largely of European descent. Here's a clip from when you visited Hazleton.
The Hispanic community love Hazleton.
Half of them were born in the Dominican Republic or Puerto Rico. The other half were born here, and they're Hazleton natives too. I think it's encouraged a lot of people to speak up about how they feel, and that could have been done in many different ways. And they speak about any of their opinions, regardless of how against or for. I think he's definitely opened a discussion, but maybe not the most polite or politically correct discussion.
Mike, what I learned from your piece is if somebody had the benefit and they could take the prism of history and look at Hazleton, is just in many other cities, but in this case, the city you visited, you go back a century ago.
Right.
The same conversations they're having now largely about the Dominican population, they said about our forefathers, whether they were Italian or Irish or whatever else, need not apply, comparing to dogs and everything. It's repeating itself in a different way. Was that lost on a lot of the folks there, or did they know and they just said, well, that's a different time, today is today?
There's some of that. I mean, this is the American story, is it not?
Yeah.
We are a nation of immigrants. One group comes in, then another group comes in, and the first group that was here can't get used to the second group, and then the second group settles in, and then the third group comes in, and they all have to get used to each other. This American story has been going on now for over 100 years. There, maybe close to 200 for all I know. And in Hazleton, it's playing out in a very, very personal way, because picture a town that was settled a century ago by German, Irish, Italian, Polish immigrants, and their sons and daughters all grew up expecting a particular way of life. The economy fell, again, the economy is a factor. The coal mines started to close down. And so there wasn't the kind of economic future guaranteed that these people thought there would be. But new warehouses started opening up with low jobs and small factories and that sort of thing. And that's when you had an influx of largely Dominicans, many from northern New Jersey and New York City. They moved in, and there was that classic clash of cultures. It's starting to settle down a bit, but for a good decade or more, it was pretty tense. And Hazleton's mayor at the time, a guy who's now running for U.S. Senate,
Mayor Barletta, right?
Lou Barletta, put through a local law that would punish anyone who rented a apartment or home to an undocumented immigrant, would punish any business owner who hired an undocumented immigrant, and then this was the big one, required that Hazleton be an English-only city. Well, of course, all this was struck down by the federal courts, but it catapulted Barletta to the U.S. Congress, where he became one of the first congressmen to endorse Trump, and now he's running for U.S. Senate. He's far behind, but Trump is supporting him. He's gone out there to campaign for him. So, and
then you have another voice from a totally different walk of life, Joe Maddon, for baseball fans, now the Cubs manager. In fact, he managed a team who broke the curse, if you will.
Sure.
So he was a local boy.
Yep.
I think if I got it right, his father ran, what was it, a butcher shop
No,
or
a
something?
pl- a plumbing
A
opera-
plumbing
yeah,
operation.
yeah.
His mom was a civil servant until I guess her 80s.
Well, his mom worked in a local luncheonette until she was 83. She's now 85.
So he comes back into town. He said, wait, this isn't a town I remember.
Mm.
And then he learned that there was, I think your words in there, he described it as like a darkness that set on the town.
Yeah, it was a stunning moment when Madden explained this to me, a darkness. And I said, "What do you mean?" He said you could just feel the life had drained out of the town. And he told me, "I'm going to keep my mouth shut." And he was home over the Christmas holidays a number of years ago. Just keep my mouth shut and listen. And that's when he discovered there was all this tension over immigration. So that's when he decided to start something that they call the Hazleton Integration Project, which is an attempt to bring people together from different ethnic backgrounds.
But I thought it was interesting because at the beginning of the second piece you do, you talk about a house party that was raided, and every single authority that could have been there for people having some drinks at 3 in the morning showed up with the firelights from the fire department, the cops, and everything else that was there.
Dog.
Right, exactly. So Madden, you described, walks into a community center, in effect, and he said, it looked like when I was a kid, you know, people cooking foods in pots, people doing whatever. And then he learned the people that were new to the community were afraid of the community because they didn't feel that they were welcome there, and they had to kind of basically live in hiding.
Right.
The older population felt that these people were trying to rip the fabric of the town that they grew up in and raised their kids in. And his attempt was, through HIP, this program, to try and bridge the divide. Now, obviously, you're not going to do that in a couple of years, but is he finding willingness on both sides or not?
Grudgingly. It's a slow process. There are some changes going on. One of the guys I interviewed was a man named John Keegan, not a Dominican, but he runs a pharmacy in town.
Yeah.
And Keegan said to me, he said, I've started to learn Spanish because I want to be able to reach out to a new customer base. So it's changing just in baby steps so far.
Again, we're going to look forward to pieces 3, 4, and 5 that are coming. Great reporting, Mike.
Thank you.
Always, I appreciate it.
Up next, we'll go from Trump country to swing districts. We'll take a closer look and ask whether they could swing the House in favor of Democrats come election night.